From the quiet slumber of winter, life stirs, poking its head up, enveloped by the warmth. Bursting forth, it explodes on Earth's canvas, a palette of texture and color in breathtaking brilliance. Rising up, it carries our hearts along, elevating our hopes for tomorrow. In reverence, we feel at one with the beauty and fall in silent harmony with Pennsylvania's wild garden. The Pennsylvania Garden once spanned the breadth of this state, one continuous yet highly diverse ecosystem. Little by little, the human thumbprint left its mark on the landscape. European settlement and later development seriously fragmented this once unified system, leaving behind only isolated communities, a series of highly diverse and scattered gardens. These are the fertile soils from which some 2,000 native plants come forth. But the grim reality is this: 5% of what was once here is gone. Another 30% hangs in the balance, listed as species of special concern. Unless we step forth to care for and tend the gardens that remain, these too could vanish forever.
You're beginning to see the snow trillium plants as you walk along here. Yes, and here's a really good population of them. You would have the older plants, which would be 12 to 15 years old, and then all the first year seedlings. And you notice how tiny they have, a single leaf, and then the next year's growth has 3 leaves.
The discovery of snow trillium in bloom on a western Pennsylvania slope is a rare sight indeed. It's rare because snow trillium is a tiny flower, only a couple of inches in height. It's rare because snow trillium is the first wildflower of the season, sometimes blossoming even before the snow has melted. But it's also rare because snow trillium exists in only 20 locations in Pennsylvania. That makes it a listed plant, a species of special concern. Under the Nature Conservancy guidelines, plants found at 21 to 50 sites are considered rare. Those located at 6 to 20 sites are classified as threatened. And endangered plants top the list for needing protection. They can only be spotted at 5 or fewer sites.
I'm drawing or making a painting of the snow trillium and some of the things that you would find along with it. There are beech drops around the base of the beech trees. There are beech leaves, white oak leaves, the snail shells that we had right here, and then a lot of the different seedlings. And what you're trying to show in a painting is a total environment or a mini environment. So if someone was to look at it and then go in the woods, they'd know exactly what to look for.
As Wissner works, her companions hope that this painting won't one day be all that's left of the snow trillium population here. You see, this site is less than 25 miles from downtown Pittsburgh, and urban sprawl threatens it at every turn. Because it is privately owned land, its future, and the future of this rare and beautiful flower, hangs in the balance. Economic development is the biggest threat facing Pennsylvania's plants. As new construction pushes the earth around, it wounds delicate ecological systems and can permanently change the mix of vegetation.
The biggest threats to rare and endangered plant species, as well to all native plant species in the state, are development pressures, and those come in the form of housing developments, highway projects, wetland encroachments, mineral extraction such as coal mines and sand and gravel mines, those kind of things. Second on the list, we have a lot of pressure from deer browse, believe it or not. We have erected our first deer exclosure for the prime purpose of protecting an endangered plant population on Forbes State Forest. And many botanists feel like this is the biggest pressure on the native plants in the state, as well as the foresters feel that way in terms of tree regeneration.
Encroachment from non-native, usually European species, also poses a major threat to Pennsylvania plants. Nowhere is this problem more evident than at Presque Isle, a recreation and vacation spot for thousands of tourists, located on Lake Erie. Biologists continue their exploration as the rain erupts, adding moisture to an already wet environment. Presque Isle is home to Pennsylvania's only wet palestrin sandflat, a natural community which is globally threatened. Here, the thriving remnants of unusual rushes and sedges, plants and flowers. But this rich habitat is being overrun by invaders from other lands, like these Phragmites, sometimes called reedgrass. As they take root and spread, exotic plants crowd out important native species, like Baltic rush, silverweed, alpine rush, variegated horsetail, and Garber's sedge, a Pennsylvania endangered species.
The palestrin sandplain has 24 of the listed plants that occur at Presque Isle. 24 of the 60 rare plants that occur at Presque Isle occur within the wet sandplain. The dry sandplain, where we have the puccoon and the lupin, which are both listed plants, there's about a dozen listed plants in the dry sandplain. And of course, the most showy would be the puccoon and the lupin. And one of the most threatened would be the hairy puccoon.
The hairy puccoon, or Hispid gromwell population, has been so impacted by exotic plants and deer browsing that only 28 plants remain. But with the help of Pennsylvania's Wild Resource Conservation Fund, Bissell is determined to restore this sensitive area. That involves efforts on two fronts: mowing where areas are thick with exotics, and a time-consuming soil turnover and weeding program.
If we don't save the puccoon now, I mean, we're down to 28 plants. If we don't save it now, pretty soon there's not going to be any way we can save it because it's gone.
While it's too early to tell if the puccoon will survive, areas mowed last year have already allowed openings for lupins to re-emerge. As the rains subside and the day gives way to nightfall, an eerie sort of peacefulness descends on Presque Isle.
I love Presque Isle. It's easy to get me to come here, and I would probably try to come even if the museum weren't funded by the Wild Resource Conservation Fund. It's just, it draws someone such as myself with an interest in discovering, rare species, but just the diversity. There's just an amazing diversity in all the natural communities in the park.
There are several hundred different types of natural communities in Pennsylvania.
There it is. Look at that. Oh my God. That is huge. Wow.
Each hosts a dynamic and variable mix of plants and animals sharing a common environment.
Have you guys ever seen this before? Probably just...
Where a particular organism exists has a lot to do with geology and how the land was formed long, long ago. For instance, this natural community is considered a glacial lake, a somewhat common result of glacier movement in northeastern Pennsylvania. Glacial lakes are known for their crystal clear waters and sand-covered lake floors. Glacial lakes are teeming with life. Amphibians, fish, and plants coexist and thrive in this diverse and beautiful habitat.
Submerged aquatic plants are kind of unusual because you don't expect to see flowers out in the water, first of all. Many times you think of aquatic plants as just being pond weeds or algae that's in the way of swimming and so forth. But if you look out here, what we have, I mean, we have beautiful white flowers out there. We have the floating hearts that had that unusual white flower that came up. And I think that's the most intriguing part to me, is just the fact that they're so different and you do not expect to see them out there.
As in most natural communities, there are also species on the edge of extinction. Here at Bruce Lake, the floating heart is threatened. The golden club, rare. These plants are an integral part of the ecosystem. Their values lie in the complex mix of life unique to each environment. Plants are a crucial link in the survival of mankind. As a source of food, virtually all of our nourishment is derived directly or indirectly from plants. Plants, and particularly flowers, are also valuable aesthetically. You simply can't underestimate the pleasure of experiencing the natural beauty of an alkaline fen and the discovery of a patch of threatened, showy lady slippers. Plants are of vital importance to our physical health and well-being as well. As a matter of fact, some 25% of all our prescription drugs come from plants. The heart drug Digitalis, for example, comes from purple foxglove. The Pacific yew gives us Taxol, a treatment for cancer. In the over-the-counter market, a whopping 60% of the medicines we take contain some form of natural product. It sounds like a large number, but the truth is, only about 1/10 of all our vegetation has been screened for medicinal purposes. That leaves a lot of unexplored territory, not to mention a time-consuming and often frustrating scientific task.
Most likely, there is a cure for cancer and other diseases in nature, because we've had such a good experience in finding new drugs from nature that the probability exists that the cures are out there. Now, that's not to say that you can also find it through new methods, maybe through biochemical studies, through biotechnological studies. But the point is, if nature has already encountered it, the probability is that it's out there someplace. We just have to be diligent enough and spend enough time looking for all these and spending the time needed to do that to see if these, in fact, are borne out.
A plant can actually make the difference between life and death. No one knows that better than National Wildlife Federation President Jay Hare, who watched a miracle drug save the life of his daughter, Whitney.
For several weeks, she was undiagnosed as to what her illness was, and she literally was within days of death when it was finally diagnosed that she had a very rare form of blood cancer. And on the day before she was supposed to die because of her illness, she was treated with a drug that I credit with actually having saved her life, because from that point forward, she got progressively better. And that drug was derived from a plant called the rosy periwinkle. And the rosy periwinkle was a native of the island country of Madagascar. Had that drug not been discovered, I'm certain my daughter and lots of other people who've had blood-related cancers would not be alive today.
meaning that we've been doing a lot of research over the last 11 years. And
The human value is just one reason why Pennsylvania took action in 1983 to protect its native plants and non-game animal species. The result was the creation of the Wild Resource Conservation Fund.
The Wild Resource Conservation Fund views itself as the steward of Pennsylvania's wild gardens. This is a big mandate because we have to collect the data to put into the scientific hands to make the decisions if the plants become endangered or threatened or on that list of species of special concern.
The Wild Resource Conservation Fund is probably the most important thing that Pennsylvania has ever done for non-game species of wildlife and wild plants. There is nothing to top it. And I support it wholeheartedly. I was so excited when the law passed, and I will continue throughout my life to support it in every way that I can.
One vitally important program, partially supported by the fund, is the Pennsylvania Natural Diversity Inventory, or PNDI. This project launched an extensive effort to inventory, monitor, and manage the state's rare, threatened, and endangered plants.
What the Pennsylvania Natural Diversity Inventory is an information system that holds information to describe occurrences of endangered plants as well as animals in the state of Pennsylvania. So what I've done today was to fill out a field survey form that eventually will be entered into the information system. That information system then is used to categorize the status of plants and animals in the state as well as to protect those species.
Chris? Yeah, you busy? No.
PNDI is jointly maintained by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, and the Nature Conservancy. Over the years, it has proven to be a valuable tool in land use planning.
One of the ways that we attempt to protect species of special concern, whether it's flora or fauna, is to utilize the Pennsylvania Natural Diversity Inventory. Whenever we're doing something of a significant nature, for example, road building, we'll utilize that inventory to see whether we have the presence of one of those species of special concern. And if we do, then we take measures to avoid adversely impacting on that species.
The search for native plants often begins at one of the state's herbariums, like the one at Penn State University. This is a depository where historical records and plant specimens are kept, some which date back to the 1800s. It's a wealth of information, the starting point for many exhaustive searches.
If a person wants to, say, take an inventory of a very rare plant or a set of plants, then one of the first things one would want to do is to find out the historical records known for that plant. Where has it been collected before? Has it been collected in all the counties? Maybe it's not rare then, or maybe it is. One doesn't quite know until one begins to assess where the plant's been collected. And although old labels sometimes are not very specific, at least they give some idea of an area within the state where a plant may have occurred many years ago. And of course, now the question is it still there?
This grass of Parnassus bloom is an excellent example of an old historical specimen. It was collected in 1867 near Easton, Pennsylvania. More than 100 years would pass before it would be found and documented again.
That's the grass of Parnassus, right?
PNDI researcher John Koonsman found this wildflower and several others growing in an alkaline fen in Mount Bethel, not far from Easton.
I got here right when the Parnassia and the Lobelia were starting to bloom, and when I saw those, I immediately knew this was a pretty special area. So then I immediately started looking for grasses and sedges, which are plants that aren't quite as conspicuous as these other two species, and started making a list like I usually do, and quickly found a whole lot of rare species, so I became pretty excited about the place.
The thrill of discovering an elusive wildflower can make up for many years of fruitless searching. Dr. Ann Rhodes had almost given up on ever finding Iris prismatica, a species she finally stumbled upon one day while looking at some sedges in a wet meadow.
Just about the time I found Carex buxbaumii, one of the sedges I was looking for, I became aware of big blue something sort of out of the corner of my eye, and when I turned to it and focused on it, I said, Iris prismatica. How about that? So there it is, and since we found it at another place in Bucks County, so Iris prismatica is alive and well in Bucks County and in Pennsylvania, which is exciting. I mean, we want to find that these plants are still here. It's a happy occasion.
Mrs. Detweiler, this is the conservation easement document that will be recorded in the county courthouse and run with the land in perpetuity.
Finding a rare, threatened, or endangered plant is only the first step along that long road toward protection. In the case of these Iris prismatica, Dr. Rhodes was lucky. They were growing in a meadow owned by Elsie Detweiler, a woman with a long-standing interest in land preservation. After talking with the Heritage Conservancy, Mrs. Detweiler agreed to sign a conservation easement to protect the Iris prismatica habitat.
A conservation easement is a very good option for a landowner because it gives them the ability to continue to own the land, to pass it down to their children if they choose, or to sell it if they need to sell it for financial reasons. But it gives them the ability to protect it and control what will happen in perpetuity on the property.
I want to sign it because there are so many farms that are being built up that are no longer farms, and there isn't much place to walk around anymore. Everything is being built up, and my family likes to walk in the fields and look at the flowers and things, so that's why I want to sign it. Mickey is my great-grandchild, and you wonder what's going to be left for her with all the building going up. It's like the city was coming out here, you know. And we moved out here so we wouldn't be in the city.
Acquisition, either by a public agency or a private conservation concern, is another way to protect a species in trouble. That's exactly what happened here at the Enlow Fork Natural Area in southwestern Pennsylvania. This spot was once downstream from the site of a proposed dam. But local citizens worried that the construction might raise water levels, saturate the surrounding floodplain, and permanently alter the ecological mix of plants and animals. At risk, the habitats which sustain this delicate carpet of snow called the blue-eyed Mary, purple phlox, white trillium, toad trillium, wake robin trillium, twin leaf, swamp buttercup, and bluebells.
If you just look around at the area, you can become attached to it right away. It's a beautiful area. It's one of the most beautiful areas in this county, and I just felt that it would be a shame to have it underwater. There were many tracts of privately owned ground in here, and there was some corporately owned ground, and the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy was very instrumental in being able to bring those landowners together and consummate a purchase and subsequently transfer the title to the surface over to the Game Commission.
As publicly owned land, Enlow Fork is now protected from further development pressures.
This roadside basically simulates that habitat naturally, and I think
But
this is a case
land acquisition is simply not possible or even economically feasible in every case. If our threatened and endangered wildflowers are to survive, we must stand committed to their protection. We must choose to act as the stewards of Pennsylvania's lands and waters.
I very definitely feel that there's enormous interrelationships, very complex interrelationships that we're not realizing at all. You may wonder, well, why should we protect this one plant? Because it is just that, it's one species. But there's insects that are connected to this because they're the pollinators of these plants. Now, they may be an insect that's also a pollinator of another plant that has commercial value. There's small mammals, there's birds, there's all sorts of other things that are interacting. And to shake one part of that web, you can't do that without shaking the whole web.
These plants have to be protected for future generations. They're the ones that are going to come up with the cure for leukemia and cystic fibrosis, and potential AIDS cure could be in these native wild plants within the Commonwealth's borders. And if they're gone forever.
As the growing season wanes, we remember Pennsylvania's natural garden, rich with life, lush in its boldness and color, striking in texture and diversity. For generations, it followed the gentle course of nature, blossoming unattended, unfettered, and wild. But in our quest for progress, we fragmented the systems that once nurtured these plants and flowers. We literally stole away their freedom to flourish. It is up to us to tend the soils that remain, for we are the ones that must sow the seeds to preserve Pennsylvania's wild garden. It is up to us to ensure that a natural heritage rooted in the past is nourished with the future.